COVID 19 is the most serious health crisis the world has experienced in a century. It could also be one of the biggest of jobs in human history. That matters greatly. When people are stripped of their work, they suffer losses, not just of income, but of dignity, meaning, and of course, hope. We need to relook at our job seekers and job givers, change their profile from recovering from this economist distress. Now, we have an exciting and very eye catching panel discussion on self reliant and sustainable employment challenges in industries in post COVID era. And you will hear from the practical insights and challenges of some of our young entrepreneurs. I welcome you once again for this very exciting panel discussion in INDICON 2021. Let me introduce to the moderator of this panel discussion, Mr. Shiban Banerjee, co-founder and CEO, Knowledge Arc Technology. Shiban was previously the head of innovation portfolio for TCS Utilities UK. He is an avid learner and was always at his happiest at the intersection between people, problems, and products. His passion towards innovation and learning led him to co found ISAC, the education platform for the WhatsApp first generation, a world where students expect their learning experience to be as engaging as WhatsApp or YouTube channel combined. I welcome you, Mr. Shivan Banerjee, and I request you to kindly moderate this panel discussion.
Thanks a lot, Ruchika. Thanks for having me as a moderator to this discussion, especially given the esteemed panelists that we have. What I would do is I'll introduce one panelist at a time, invite him to provide his point of view over the course of 7 minutes, move on to the next panelist. Once we all three of them have given their views, I would put forth my view on this topic as well. Then we would have a panel discussion within the panelists, and there would be a period of 10 to 15 minutes where we would open it up to audience questions. Is that fine?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Excellent. So I think without further ado, let's start. And I will start, if you can give me permission to share my screen. Yes, that seems to work now. Right. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Hi. So first, I would like to introduce Atharva Pondarik. He is the chairperson of Industrial and Corporate Relations Cell, IIT Ropar. Now, Dr. Pondarik has 8 peer-reviewed publications in high-impact international journals, over 20 conference presentations, and 2 US papers. He is passionate about India's self-reliance in research, development, and manufacturing of advanced therapeutics and medical devices. Prior to his current role in IIT Ropar, he had founded a couple of successful startups in this field as well. His current role is highly multidisciplinary, involving multiple stakeholders, assessment of economic and market feasibility, partnerships with industry, healthcare institution, clinical interaction for trials, and also an understanding of intellectual property, IP, and government policy. So he is literally the perfect candidate in this forum to talk about academia's role in making our nation as a whole self-reliant and to facilitate sustainable employment. So without further ado, Dr. Pondarik, I would hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you.
My screen share. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Shiban. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me over here. It's a privilege to be interacting with the experts here and to be speaking to the audience at INDICON. Now, I come from a very diverse background. but my experiences mean that my perspective will largely be from the healthcare, manufacturing, and the academic perspective, right? So just to give you a little more backdrop, prior to joining IIT Roper, we founded a manufacturing unit, and that unit is in the manufacturing in the area of medical textiles. Is 3 years old. We are currently exporting also. I have a startup which is working on developing high-end therapeutic materials from waste tissue, such as bone and placental tissue, which is discarded otherwise. And that startup is funded by 2 large government grants. So again, that is in the area of high-end biologics, is an R&D startup. Now, in addition to that, at IIT Roper, I am the chairperson of industry and corporate relations. And so that gives me the privilege of having interacted or being able to interact with various industry leaders in and around the region of Punjab, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, and the vicinity. One of the key elements that has sort of been reflected by the industry members that we have interacted with at IIT Roper is that COVID-led disruptions have fundamentally changed how business sectors, particularly in manufacturing, operate. Okay, and what I will do is I will sort of speak a bit about the generic points, but then give some examples based on my interaction with specific industries, so that the points can sink in. So I feel that COVID-19 has been much discussed, but the whole area of self-reliance and sustainable employment, the COVID-19 was simply a wake-up call, right? I don't think anyone can deny that to be a technological superpower, India has to be self-reliant and constantly innovate. The advantage, or I would say the merit, if you will, of being put in a situation like COVID is that it forces you to think harder and take some action. And that is really what has happened. So recently there was a statement by the principal scientific advisor, Dr. Vijay Raghavan, that there's been a measurable increase in industry academia connect during and after COVID. And the reason for that is that the major disruption that was faced in various supply chains, the restrictions of travel, transport, and conducting of manufacturing activity meant that traditional businesses completely lost their markets. So I will share an example here. Punjab is known for its large textile industry. And one such unit which operates in the fashion space and had apparently the highest sales on record since inception last year, March, basically saw their sales go down to zero due to the lockdown restrictions. And so they evolved very quickly into a PP garment manufacturer. And of able to quickly pivot and change your operations into something which can help you survive is really what you would construe as being self-reliant, in my opinion. So your ability to adapt quickly, and it is quite challenging. The industries that managed to do that, and this industry is an example, despite having to cut their workforce by around 60%, they survived, and that has for which they have approached the institute, and now we are looking at along with this company developing some advanced materials and fabrics for high-end space and defense related applications. So you see that a company that is making fashion retail for retail is now engaging in high-end, high-performance technical textiles, and such kind of transformation and expertise. It becomes difficult to carry that through without the role of academia. So such instances throughout the country where businesses have had to let go of their original operations or pivot have meant the increasing role of research institutions coming in, providing their human resource expertise, their technological capabilities and infrastructure, and then working out a mechanism by which the solutions can be translated back and commercialized by these industries is now increasing, and the need is felt throughout various industry sectors. Textiles is just one of them, but there are quite a few others that have approached us. And since COVID-led disruptions have taken place, they seriously are engaging with the institute in that capacity. Now, the other area where I feel, from the manufacturing standpoint, the need for self-reliance is that industries that have operated in the commodity space, for example, where the manufacturing process is run of the mill, and anyone who has capital can do it. We have come to a time where there needs to be technological enhancement, and the conventional route for developing new products or getting in technology has been through various kinds of joint ventures or collaborations or partnerships with foreign entities. The challenge in that, though, is that no country or a group of people will give their technological superiority. So we are at a stage now where the amount of inputs we are getting in terms of new technology through these technology partners is dwindling, right? And so the industries have pointed out that we need to develop our own technologies beyond that standpoint. Because, of course, if we do not do it, we are not going to get it from outside. So that is the technological upgradation enhancement, for which, again, you need the manpower, research-based manpower, and the domain expertise which is available with institutes like IIT and an institution like ours, which has over 170 faculty members from over 12, 13 areas of specialization, really give that opportunity to come up with multidisciplinary products and services for companies that are willing to do so and are open to committing their time and resource.
Atharva, sorry to intervene. You
Sure.
have a minute more.
No issues. So, sort of taking that forward from the technology standpoint, I'll also come to the supply or, the self-reliance, not only in technology, but in raw materials. Now, many of these supply chains, and you'll see that the government again is pushing that through various PLI schemes. The recent one that was announced was in the area of semiconductor fab. But I come from healthcare. Last year, they announced one in medical devices and pharmaceuticals. Now, India is reliant largely on APIs, which are active pharma ingredients, bulk of which come from China. And so when the shipping costs go up and there is, there is no provision for lines to transport material from one country to the other, then how do you deal with it? You need to have your own downward integration. And that is one thing that industries, especially in specialized manufacturing sectors, don't have access to, which is the high-end raw materials, again, for which the country needs to be self-reliant. Such initiatives, innovations, enhancing your supply chain base and so on and so forth, will undoubtedly result in a greater amount of skilled manpower and workforce, which then contributes to the self-reliance in the employment part of the discussion, right? So I'll end there, and then I guess we'll take it forward when we discuss the topic.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Atharva.
Yeah.
Those were really insightful points that you raised. Now, at this point, given that you touched on industry as a whole, we have Sunit with us, who is especially apt in that field which you touched upon. So he is currently the leading officer at Techno FAQ Digital Media, and he would be touching upon how companies can be self-reliant and have a sustainable business, which means sustainable employment as well. So Techno FAQ Digital Media is a startup specializing in digital publishing and IT consultancy services. It operates 3 magazines related to science, technology, engineering, and business, namely Techno FAQ, Tech Decoded, and Next FAQ. It also operates India's one and only and Asia's second privacy-first email service, which is Letter. So he himself has spent 2 years in the telecom industry and 7 years developing open source software as a volunteer with the team at SuperX operating system project, and is currently pursuing his PhD degree from IIT Guwahati. So, Sunit, I now invite you to please go ahead and put forward your points. Thanks.
My co-panelist Atharva has put forward very good points related to how there is a supply chain disruption and how people are having issues adapting to it, while some companies have been able to adapt to it and other companies have not been able to adapt to it because of raw materials not coming in from cross-border locations like China to India. So me, on the other hand, I'm going to focus on a completely different thing, since even though it is related, but even though I'm in a completely different field, but it is quite related to what Dr. Atharva put forward his points. So I founded Technofact Digital Media last year, and before that I've been working as a professional, and we are a completely digital company. We have no offices. All our employees are completely remote. We are a team of very hardworking 5 people, and we are whatever like we fit in that category where most people want to most people want to say that this is the new breed of companies that are coming up in existence. So as a digital business, so there is a misconception that digital businesses are doing much better in this COVID situation, but the reality is very far from that. So at the start of COVID, businesses were at a race to get into this digital first initiative so that they can sell their goods and services to people over a digital platform. So there was a huge boom in huge boom in the consumption of digital goods and IT services, and things like collaborative platforms and video streaming solutions. The boom happened over the Q1, Q2, and Q3 of 2020. But after that, things started to slump. Things didn't start to slump at exactly one place. We work in 3 verticals. So the first vertical is we are in tech journalism. Second is we trade advertising and advertising content and placement, and we also provide IT services. So as the consumption of retail consumers started to drop over a period of time, just because of the supply chain issues, over a period of time, businesses have less and less money to spend on these kind of infrastructure services that are present on the internet. At the same time, they are also less likely to spend on advertising, and also less likely to spend money on journalists to cover their product releases. So apart from just the manufacturing and sales being affected, auxiliary industries like ours are also affected by a huge margin after 2020 Q3. So right now, at the end of Q2 2020, sales at the end of Q2 2020 and sales at the end of Q4 2021, if you compare that time and this time, we are running at 45% of revenue what it used to be earlier. So this is the situation, and this beats the misconception that tech-only companies are booming at this point of time. And now, how can we solve these issues? So the thing is, that we have to first figure out how can we ease trade restrictions. So sometimes what happens is that we may need, in some specific cases, we may need to put our ego and nationalistic issues aside for a moment, and some bare minimum requirements, bare minimum goods that we need to import need to be done. So if we need to import goods from China at this point of time, we should do it. And then over a period of time, study their technology, see how they're building stuff. And then we can start replicating whatever they're making, and we can start making it at home. China did this with the US products. We can do that with Chinese products. So complete ban or a blanket ban just for the sake of diplomacy is not always the best solution. And the second thing is that government is presently working on development of many domestic manufacturing hubs spread across the country in every corner. But the problem is that there is still a lack of access to those hubs. If you have good connections, it's very easy to get access to these things. But let's say you are just starting out of college and you want to manufacture something. It's a huge hurdle trying to get your product into manufacturing as soon as possible. One of my co-startup founders started a different company. They started making some power system electronics, and they were initially importing goods from China to assemble and sell those power systems in India, and their goal was to develop power systems, and at one point of time to become totally indigenous in the course of 5 years. But immediately after this COVID thing happened and the restrictions came into place, the import stopped, and both their manufacturing and R&D was heavily hit. And that guy was specifically looking for access to all of these manufacturing hubs so that he can produce his specific product to be able to manufacture and sell it domestically. After making several rounds, he fed up, and the next thing he did was fly to France and do the exact same thing over there. And he is saying that in 7 years' time, he'll become completely, he'll become completely indigenous in terms of the European Union. So we need to reduce these kind of barriers to entry, not only at trade level, but also access to manufacturing hubs. And we should also be giving easy access and lowering costs for loans and capital injection into SMEs and startups. You will find that even today, PSU banks have a huge lethargy or reluctance to offer business loans to startups, especially when they are trying to do something like manufacturing or creating facilities. They always the PSU banks mentality is that it's a very high risk business, so I cannot extend my loans over there.
Sunit, sorry to intervene, but you have a minute more.
Okay. And when we go into all of these things, you'll find that not only there is issue with loans, but then when you start a business and when you create a service in one vertical, you need to acquire a license for every vertical and run it. Similarly, when you talk about filing taxes, for GST, you need to file 3 returns per month, an additional 1 return every year. Then you need to file income tax 1 return every year. Then if you want to send money abroad, you're providing services to abroad or importing services from abroad to send money abroad, you have to file a form 15 CACB. And everywhere there is a barrier, because these things you will not be able to do without a lot of third-party involvement. Once this third-party involvement and lot of requirement of connections reduce and the bureaucracy doesn't go down, then companies like ours will often try to shift to other jurisdictions and try to find an easier path to achieve what they want, and we will not be able to make India self-reliant. Thank you, and we can move on to the next.
Thanks a lot, Sunil. There were a number of thought-provoking points in what you said, and I'm sure we would be touching upon them in later on in the discussion. For now, we've Dr. Atharva talked about nation and industries as a whole. You, Sunil, talked about what companies have to do and the associated government policies which have to facilitate the sustainability of those companies. Now, the people working in those companies were students before they started working in those companies. Angad, who is the CEO and founder of Edufa, he would be speaking about how we can enable a system wherein we help those students be more self-reliant, either monetarily or exposure-wise, so that they go on to play a big part in the self-reliant, themselves becoming self-reliant, and creating sustainable employment in companies as well. With his 12 years in the higher education industry, Angad has always been an educator and evolving learner, but with more importantly, with an aim to redefine education via Edufa. Edufa actually stands for Education for All, and they are working on a mission to make education accessible, affordable, and employment oriented for students. In fact, he has been able to create a social change through disruption in the unorganized and mismanaged private education space in India as well as abroad. So, without further ado, Angad, I invite you to make your points. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Shiban, for that intro, and thanks to the panelists at INDICON for having me here, the organizers. And I was listening to the panelists, talk about how post-COVID, what has that impact been on the industry from that perspective and from the academia perspective. I'm going to, like Shiban rightly said, I'm going to talk because of my experience. I'm going to be talking about, from the students' perspective, and of course, what it has led. The impact of COVID has led to the opportunities as well as some of the challenges. But first, a little bit background about myself. I think Shiban touched upon. I've spent close to 13 years now in the higher education space, and most of it has been in the employability space. So essentially, what Edufa does is we work like a college within a college. We underwrite seats from certain private institutions, and we offer those seats to students that enroll through our program. So we are one of the largest of our kinds in private channel of international students coming to study in India, and we offer them what is essentially a work study program. And what we're trying to do is offer a solution to two problems, and that those two problems are the lack of affordability and employability in higher education. Now, what has happened is, and I'm sure all of you would agree, in the last 15 to 20 years, when we graduated from our colleges, our parents did think that going to a good college, a top university, would sort of guarantee us a job, a future, a career, which is not the case anymore. In the last 20 odd years, the value that you get from a college degree has gone down considerably every year. And yet the price of the very same degree has gone up, which is an interesting sort of a bubble. And so through our work study model, what we thought about was there is a hugely untapped resource of Indian students studying for 4 years in colleges, 4 to 6 years in colleges, and they're heavily underutilized by organizations. By making sure that there's a collaborative involvement of organizations, startups, any organization who wants to utilize this untapped student manpower. What it can enable us to do is to create from the students' perspective a work study program that lowers their cost to quality education, because they're working simultaneously throughout their college life. And second, by the time they graduate, in comparison to their peers, they would have not only had a degree, but 4 years of relevant experience and skills. Most importantly, skills and abilities which are essential to succeed. And success is a step ahead, but the first thing is to survive. I think the abilities and skills needed to survive in today's world especially post COVID. So we're talking about today, being self-reliant and sustainable employment. So if I'm a student right now in college, for me, self-reliance is not relying on a college degree, uh, you know b- and trying to get as much as I can, uh, um, the ability to work with a lot of organizations. So I look at the future and I see our kids probably won't go to a conventional college. Our kids would probably not do a conventional 9 to 5 job. I see them, maybe they'll be the entire gig economy will become a truth, where you'll wake up one day, you'll log into your system and you'll do a project. You'll get a notification one fine morning, this is the project you need to do. At the end of the day, you'll get paid for it, and that's it. So I mean, we don't know. The future is evolving at such a fast pace that the formal higher education sector also needs to evolve. And what that means for the students is, alongside getting a formal education, they need to be able to pick up skills and abilities which the employers of today want. It's interesting because we're talking about self-reliance. There's an example I would like to give. A few years, I think a couple of years ago, there was a post on LinkedIn. I was scrolling and I found one of the topmost, I think it was IIT Kanpur, but it does not matter which IIT it was. It was one of the flag bearers of Indian education, world class education, and it's the best institutions, some of the best institutions that we have. But we had a situation where a high growth startup, had recruited certain students from that organization, from that institution. And when the time came to for the students to join, in those 6-8 months period, the startup had run out of funds. And they had asked the institution that, hey, we, our plans have changed, and we can't offer them an employment straight away. Maybe in 12 months time things would be different. And then there was a huge hue and cry, and I saw the training placement cell from that institution, blacklisting the college, the organization. And the interesting part is that organization is still surviving. What it came across to me was one of the leading institutions in our country saying that, hey, if our students don't get a job, the job that we have gotten them from our training and placement cell, that means their careers are ruined. That in the 4 years they were here, we have not made them self-reliant. That even if this volatile startup world, sets you back, you can't really get on your feet. And that messaging I've seen in the last 2 years change. In COVID, I think there has been an acceleration in terms of acceptance by not only institutions but by everyone, that we live in an era, in a world which is where we need to be super quick and agile in our decision making, in our ability, in our thought process. Some of my colleagues have spoken about. Atharva was talking about how people have become flexible. They're very swift. Same as the case with Sunit. And that's what we're seeing, through and through. And in fact, in our own case, I think, so I mentioned we are the largest channel for international students to come and study in India, but our students need a student visa for 6 months. The early part of 6 months, when the first lockdown was announced, of course, there was a knee-jerk reaction of what is going to happen. Our business will stop because the students can't come and study in India, and our students come from Africa, which currently, again, with the Omicron coming in, the travel plans have been hit. But I think the last phase really taught us that we needed to be a little more flexible. So our messaging changed. We started talking to our students and telling them that, hey, while there is uncertainty in the world, there shouldn't be uncertainty about your career aspirations. Whether you join college this year or next year, enroll in our program. And that sort of changed. And there onwards started a period of last 18 months where students have enrolled. Today, the students enroll in our programs for admission in a college program in 2024. Now that is 3 years ahead, right? And that is fabulous because these students have figured out a way to become self-reliant and not just hope and wish for a college to certify and make them employable, but they want to work in a program where they get to learn skills, they get to work with organizations. So, and how we do that in our company, we work with a whole host of startups. Shiban being one. Shiban, we want to come in?
Just 1 minute to go. Sorry.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, we can continue this conversation also. But Shiban at ISAC being one of the employees that works with us closely, and so we leverage all these organizations to help us offer our students a way of becoming flexible and skills. Okay, the other skill I would like to talk about is we live in a knowledge era, right? So it's the value is on creating uh, value. Essentially, it's we live in a world which values creativity. Gone are the days where we work for 9 to 5. There's a limited amount of work that we will be able to accomplish, and therefore if somebody writes a piece of code which is worth thousands of dollars, or a marketing campaign which is which gets a company $1 million worth of contract, I mean that you can't really quantify in terms of any knowledge. It's about being creative, and for that in itself is a skill. The other skill is being able to work remotely with minimal supervision. Sunit said that his organization is completely remote. Edufa, for once, had never worked remotely. But for the last 18 months, we've not, all 50 of our team members, we've never had a moment where all of us are in one office, right? So we've all had to adapt, be able to work remotely. And those are skills that I feel the students need to learn. And the best way to do that is while they're at college, there's a lot of opportunity to work for various organizations. And those organizations also can benefit through this student manpower. Happy to take on more questions, Shaban, later on.
Thanks a lot, Angad. Just give me a moment. Yeah. Yes, thanks for that. So you touched upon a lot of important points from an individual perspective. Now you also touched upon this, and you spoke at length about the skills which are needed in the current industry setting. Right now, I'm going to follow up on that. So, and I'm sure anybody who has been in any industry for 5 years would all agree to the exact same thing. Nobody cares, or it doesn't matter whether you remember the theorems which have been taught in school and college or not, right? It doesn't even matter whether you have understood something like a Fourier transform or some theory around AI and machine learning, for instance. Yes, you can understand it. That's great. So you can pass the test. Brilliant job done. This is what our education system focuses on, right? Whether you remember or not, or whether you can just put it out in a test or not, or at max, whether you have understood or not. But in the industry, I think all of us would agree that what matters more is, can you apply those theorems which you know with that theory? Can you apply that in practical life or not? Without supervision, as Angad was saying. Do you have the intellectual capability or the cognitive ability to analyze all the information that you have, evaluate them, create, innovate? These four are essentially, and I took Bloom's taxonomy as an example because that sort of encapsulates what I wanted to convey. And there are a lot of similar taxonomies available as well. But so it's these four which are more needed now more than ever, right? As compared to these. Now, if I sort of now that was theory, right? That's taxonomy. You can get it in a research paper. This is Google search. If you type top 10 skills which are needed in the industry right now, word your search in any way, right? These are the things which come up. There is no AI here, right? There is no blockchain or machine learning, etc., etc., etc. There isn't even any vaccine research, for instance. Those are abilities, and that's the knowledge that you have. But in terms of skill, as Angad was saying, are you able to solve complex problems yourselves or not? Do you have the cognitive flexibility? Are you able to adapt? Do you have the ability to learn fast? technology, for instance, is changing at such a rapid pace, right? I come from a software background, so I can speak on that behalf with confidence that you might know Angular 6 or 7, you might know a few algorithms in AI, etc., etc. That would be outdated in 3 months, right? So your ability to learn fast. I've hired hundreds and interviewed hundreds before. These two are the most important abilities that you are, or skills that you are looking for, along with the others in a similar order. So these are the skills, and now more than ever, I think it's high time that in order for our nation as a whole to be self-reliant and sustainable, as you said, Dr. Atharva, or students who go to companies, and what Angad pointed out, in order for us to do that, we have to make sure, or at least try our best, to inculcate these four in our students. Now more than ever, now students, our education system has always been very good at stressing upon the need for the students to be able to impress. Now more than ever, I think we also need to stress on giving the students their ability to express themselves. I think the modern generation highly needs that, and COVID, I believe, is a good trigger point where we are seeing some changes with respect to NEP, and I think there would be a lot of changes which would come through going forward in the upcoming years. So I'm quite hopeful on that. Now, that being said, both Angad and myself, we touched upon academia or our college education in different aspects. So probably a good time for Dr. Atharva. Do you want to add on to any of this? I think you spoke first, so I think it's only right that I ask you this question if you want to follow up anything on the back of that.
Yeah. So thanks, Shiban. So the word self-reliance normally at the surface level mean that you're reliant on yourself for everything, right? And that is what is generally taken as face value. But in today's globalized sort of world, we cannot make everything, we cannot offer everything, to the customer. And so it boils down to what has come up during the panel discussion is that the ability to really adapt and change in a fast-paced environment and deliver, right? That is what will constitute self-reliance. And in a way, it will come from the people who are executing it. So what we do here at IITs have, and I graduated from IIT Kanpur actually, and I can see how the system has changed quite a bit over the past 15 years. When I was there, entrepreneurship by faculty members was not even talked about. This is only a decade or so ago. There are only a couple of student startups, in these leading institutions. And now you see new policies that are coming up for faculty and student entrepreneurs. There's a lot of thrust on multidisciplinary kind of training. Because I can speak for myself that my lab has 4 members, none of which areas in which I specialize, right? And so the idea is that how do you solve complex problems? How do you adapt? You put yourself in difficult situations. You deal with issues that go beyond your domain expertise. So it's almost like being a master of one, but a jack of all, right? They no longer, so when we are looking at PhD or masters or higher education, we try and give that focus that you have electives, you work with different members of faculty from different departments, and you get a flavor of the other disciplines. And we often have this discussion that what a mechanical engineer or an electrical engineer was 40 years or 50 years ago, used to enter a company, stay there for the next 30 years, that is far gone. And we don't know how rapidly, as Angad was pointing out, and you in software, how that will change over the next year, 2 years. And certainly students should not become obsolete once they enter the workplace, 10 years down the line. And so the traits that you mentioned, and I think that is really what will constitute self-reliance. So tomorrow, if there's another disruption, and COVID in a way is just moniker for disruption. It's a disruption, just so radical that you're not able to anticipate it. But some people were able to deal with it. Some industries were able to deal with it. And how did they do it? So those are some of the examples we have to learn by. We have to create systems in place that allow us to actually respond effectively to such changes. And of course, manpower training is a large part of it.
Excellent point. Now, just following up from that, and this is to Angad. Atharva spoke with respect to his experience in a couple of IITs, right? Now, you have been collaborating with a number of other colleges. You collaborate with students and you collaborate with companies, all three, right? Now, has post-COVID and because of COVID, do you foresee any changes to the way you collaborate with students and colleges? Are you seeing any changes? And is there a way in which you yourself are trying to inculcate what Atharva spoke about with respect to what their methodology in IITs?
Right, of course. So I think what Atharva is also saying, COVID is just a moniker. I think that it has accelerated people's acceptance that it's time to change. And I think I spoke about it before, as an organization, we ourselves were guilty of never having tried to work remotely. But because of COVID, we were forced to do that. And so many organizations around the world and their employees have been forced to, come up with ways where they can function. So we work with largely private education institutions, some of whom were not adept. They're a fraction of ability at what IITs can operate. So you can imagine how slow they were or how unprepared they were for an eventuality of completely going online and teaching online. However, we saw some founders of those institutions who were really agile in terms of creating a system which eventually helped students, overcome this disruption in a manner which was not only helped them survive, but gave them a feel for the new form of education, which is a hybrid going forward. A lot of and it's not set in stone. What COVID has taught us that we don't know, we can't anticipate what's going to happen. What we can prepare for is right now. And what I think, Shivan, what you were talking about is, you don't know what the knowledge you learn whether it will become obsolete. We all know that inside Google there is a joke that engineers become obsolete in 7 years, and I think that is 13% depreciation on the knowledge that you have today, which will be gone by the time the year rolls off, right? So I think focus on skills is more important. So what we've seen is how we talk to students is there is a greater emphasis on conditioning their minds so that they are more agile and flexible to change, uncertainty. A lot of times students are, especially when you talk about the middle 60% of the student population. I'm not talking about the students that end up going to IITs. They are, of course, like Atharva said, they're fortunate that some of the brightest minds are leading them in this uncertain times. I'm talking about the middle 60% who for some reason can't get into those elite colleges. And at the same time, they don't have funds from their parents that can afford them the topmost Ivy League colleges abroad. So what really is important for these students is, that they can, rather than, hoping that one degree can offer them a job for the next 10 years, rather investing in themselves and building those skills and abilities which employers really value. And there is today, as an employer, the resourcefulness. I think Google is the biggest university in the world. Internet is the biggest university in the world. The knowledge base is there. What you are essentially paying for is, like you in your slide you share, the ability to analyze, create, those abilities. If somebody is resourceful enough to find information, comprehend that information and create something out of it, right, that in itself is a skill that any student can be taught. And we are, as an institution, we are focusing on those, and I think post COVID, I think it's become easier sell. Prior to that, students were not till the time they get into the final semester of their college, where the training placement team really runs after them, is when they would think about these things. Today you are
Right.
seeing students voluntarily accepting, because that has become that has come to the forefront.
Right, right. No, very interesting. Now, Suneet, just before we move on to audience questions, I have one very specific question to you. Now, Angad spoke about the values which employers expect and how students need to be highly agile in order to inculcate that during college. Uh, Now, the other way around has undergone a sea change in the last couple of years. So we are in the middle of what the media are terming as the great resignation, right? So
Yes.
there has been a significant mind shift in the mindset of employees in general. So what
Mm.
is your view on the cultural changes that are needed in companies going forward, such as yours, in order to be self-reliant and sustainable?
First of all, there are two things we need to keep in mind. One is from the employer side and one is from the employee side. Let us first start with the employee side. As an employee, when you join a company, you usually apply with a set of skills. You say apply with a set of qualifications and you apply with a set of skills. And it's it's required by you that over a period of time you keep your knowledge and your skills brushed up and up to date. The market is like just like time, just like flowing water, just like the ocean, just like the air. The market changes every second you sit in every 10 second the market changes, and it's very, and it changes and in the verticals that we work, it changes every month. So we have to keep adapting to each and every trend that is going on. So we have an employee with us who is working here. So he initially joined as a calligraphy artist. So he was the one who was designing posters, he was designing typography, fonts and stuff like that. But later on, as we evolved into doing IT services and developing apps and web services, he moved on to doing UX design. He did a course on UX design. He moved on to doing UX design, and now he's also doing short animated ads and video. So as the industry changes, at the same point of time, your skills also has to change according to what the market requires. And when you come, and as an employer, you must see what value your employee offers and reward them accordingly. You cannot, as an employee, you cannot expect them to hire and fire them. You cannot expect to hire and fire them like most companies do. So expect to hire and fire them as most companies do, because at the over the long period of time, when workers with good skills decide that they are being treated poorly, they will usually opt out of working for your organization, form an agency, and will come back to you and will charge you close to 10 or 20 times the amount they will be charging you. Which is why, if you want to stay sustainable, then not only the employee has to adapt to the company skill set, but the company has to adapt to caring for their employees. You should be flexible to your employees. Like, you should not, if the job does not require fixed working hours, do not enforce fixed working hours. If simple deadlines work, targets work, just stick to simple deadlines. And second thing is that you should get the work done. You should not unnecessarily make your employees work, make your employees look as if they're working harder. For example, there was this one stall we were stationed at, I think in 2020, in one of the events. I'll not go to the name, but in one of the stalls I saw that a company was forcing its employees to stand 12 hours a day in the scorching sun in an event hall, and they were not providing them chairs to sit. And you know what is the justification their manager gave me was that if employees stay on their feet at all times, it makes customers look as if they're working harder. But we all know that. But if you look at actual sales figures, you'll find that it actually makes no big difference. Like whether if the employees are actually sitting or if they are standing, it doesn't make any difference. The thing is that you should care about the comfort of your employees, not only because you value and cherish them, but happy employees mean that they're more likely to work comfortably for you. There will be a lower turnover rate. They will be able to spend time with their family and will be able to consume goods and services, which in turn will help the capitalistic economy and which will turn will encourage consumption. And in that it will help every business out there in the long run.
Thanks, Sunit. Thanks, Sunit. Now, I think we do have, I think, 10 minutes or so for audience questions. So, Ruchika, have there been any audience questions till now?
Yes, sir. One of the delegates from the Arun Gupta from the RAL Patiala, they actually wants to have some. They want very informative, this slides, especially the skills and everything. They could not have a note of it, so they want to have.
That's fine. That's fine. Absolutely. So I've given you my email. You have my email ID. Ask him to email me, and I'll be happy to send him the slide and also help in any other way I can. Not a problem.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So this is to the audience. If you have any questions, then just feel free to drop it to either to Ruchika or in the chat in the chat section, and we'll of course be happy to discuss or answer the question. Right. So while we wait for the question, now on top of what Sunit you were mentioning, so probably Atharva, you have experience. In fact, you have founded a couple of startups before and pretty successful ones at that. And Angad, obviously, you've done what you've already explained. So now, probably Atharva, from this perspective, or that employees today expect things which are a lot different to what employees used to expect 10 years back, right? So when we talk of industries being self-reliant or sustainable post-COVID era, what Sunit touched on, yes, they need to be happy, or we need to make sure that they are happy. But the definition of happiness itself has changed. And that also varies between what it means for a startup versus what it means for an established company. So in your view, or maybe Angad, you can take this question as well. How do you see that changing past the post-COVID? Because we seem to have hit that trigger point where suddenly people want a lot of different things, and a lot of companies are having problems. I know for a fact that the number of companies have had sort of 30-40% of their employees leave. So that obviously doesn't help in their own sustainability. So what do you think? Any one of you can take up this question.
So, I think when you speak of employees, a company can have employees that are low skilled, right? Which are a very different kind of employee compared to someone who is a master's or a PhD kind of graduate. And so in the manufacturing sector, if you're looking at the shop floor, the nature of employees and their expectations are very different than what, say, you would experience in a high-tech kind of IT company where most of them would be well qualified, right? Employee retention. So we currently operate. We have 25 to 30 employees. I would say 80% of them are high-skilled labor. Okay, so from various ITIs. Training technical institutes, and so see, their expectations in terms of and their retention is always a challenge. I think when you speak of employment from a manufacturing perspective, training is a big issue, right? If you're working on the shop floor and the risk is high, and this is becomes very specific. So then Shiban, it's, I sort of just want to, that's my experience, personal experience. You're not at the desk, you are operating machines, and that requires a certain level of sincerity and discipline, and to expect that from someone who is not educated is a very tough, and to enforce that is very tough to do. So if you look at the manufacturing sector, whether it be Gujarat or Punjab, the preference goes to employees, because what Sunit was saying, is very correct, that if your turnover is high, you cannot have sustainability. You spend a significant amount of time training the employee on the shop floor, and say the fellow leaves, and you get an order then, right? You cannot execute the order. So it's actually detrimental, can be devastating for the business if the turnover is high in the initial stages of the startup. But the training part of it, the retention part of it for those kind of employees is a major challenge. So the debate is between local persons, and it's interesting because that in the manufacturing sector, it's almost like when you're an immigrant, when you go to the United States, for example, you work harder, or when you change states from Bihar to Gujarat, or from UP to Punjab, you're likely to work harder. That may not be the same kind of mentality with educated employees, right, as you would, because they have a different set of training and different level of discipline. So those are my comments for the shop floor manufacturing side of it, and it's always a challenge retaining them and finding the right kind of people to make your operation sustainable, because you cannot afford to train and lose. You need to find a formula. Each industry or each company will have its own way of doing it, but it's certainly a challenge.
Right. Anything? Yeah, sorry, Sunit, you were saying something.
Yeah, so I would like to add some comments and extend what Dr. Atharva has mentioned so far. These are extensions. So if we move slightly towards more skilled workers and professionals, often coming from my experience in the very professional sector like telecom. I was 2 years in BSNL, and what employees expect is not just their pay packages or their benefits, or pay packages or their benefits, or what amount of leave travel concessions. They do not matter so much today as they used to matter many ages ago. Nowadays, employees, do not want to be, frustrated while working in the workplace. They want to go to work. They want to do their work in the smoothest way possible at the workplace, and then finish work and go back home. The employees do not want to be heckled into sitting in the office for hours more than the amount that is required for them to work. And this trend is becoming more and more prevalent in today's scenario, where employees will quit over things like not being given, being asked to spend more time than they are working, not being given enough representation in the office. They're not feeling heard. They're being pushed into a corner. Their opinions are not being treated. Their opinions are not being used in decision making. And there are also some issues. And if you are a professional worker, like if you work in the field, like if you go, I have done this myself, like if you splice fiber, or if you climb the tower and install radios, then the thing is that your manager should not go around and mess with your tools. Your tools should not move from one location to another location. Employees get extremely frustrated if the tool they have left at a certain location gets moved to another location. A lot of managers don't understand that. There are managers that have this concept called hoteling, where they expect that the workers or the employees will come every morning, pick their tools from a certain place and start working. Today employees understand that these kind of small inconvenience issues waste a lot of time and come in the lot of work.
Thanks, sir. Thanks, Sunit. So sorry to cut you short there, but we are running short on time, and I do have an audience question. This is from Arjun Nidhi from DTU Delhi. And the question is for Dr. Atharva. So, in today's world, we talk a lot about skills, right? So, in today's world, let's talk of career options. So, we can study manufacturing, IT, etc., in college. But in today's world, one of the very prominent and attractive career options is to found your own company, right? To run a startup. Now, do you think that there should be some training programs either within the curriculum or part of their extracurricular activities where students should be given training and advice on startups? Even some basics would do, but should it feature at all given the current state, that the situation that we are in or the world that we live in?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I have strong opinions regarding training people to form startups. Because most of these training programs I've seen, especially in academic institutions, are offered by maybe faculty members who have never founded or run a startup. Okay. And so, as a student, you have to be very discerning of one is how you get trained. Secondly, the best part is to do something, right? An area where you would like to train yourself is in understanding the basics of finance. If you're running a startup, you're running any organization, whether it be a startup or a shop or a kirana store, you need to understand, how to manage inventory, what your cash inflows are, what your outgoes are. These sort of things which are typically not provided during engineering training. So maybe some courses in economics, going through annual reports of companies that are listed. Okay, getting an understanding of what various areas are in the market, where the needs are, where these things are shifting. Having a basic assessment of current affairs. Finding a particular product or an area that matches with your expertise, and then sort of trying to do something, because see, the best teacher is experience. Courses and all, I think, give you some kind of, to a basic level. But even if you decide to get trained, make sure your mentors are those that have actually had that kind of prior experience. It's not just a teaching curriculum or, something of that sort, because otherwise you will be misguided. And I'm speaking, despite being a teacher, because I've seen that happen. Many students, have taken part in business plan competitions. They just end up going through those competitions and never making an actual startup. So don't get into that kind of trap. Understand the basics of finance, understand the markets a little bit, understand your core competencies, find a mentor who has actually done it, and then dive into it.
Thanks a lot, Atharva. I would just like to conclude that by sort of quoting one of my favorite lines, which is, "Knowledge is good, but knowledge is not doing. Only doing is doing." So when if you're running a startup, you have to start doing, no matter how much that brake comes after accelerator and then there is clutch. That does not substitute actual driving. So on that note, we had a really engrossing discussion over the past hour and 5 minutes. So thanks a lot, Dr. Atharva, Suneet, Angad. Thanks a lot, Ruchika, and all the organizers at INDICON for giving us this platform, and also giving this platform to the audience who have who have picked up a thing or two from the discussion here. So with that being said, Ruchika, over to you.
Thank you so much, Shivan sir, for having and moderating this wonderful session. It has thoroughly engrossing. So thank you. And all the panelists, thank you for sparing your valuable time and be with us for this wonderful deliberations. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.